On January the 8th, 2012, a symposium was held celebrating the 70th birthday of Stephen Hawking, a world-renowned theoretical physicist. In a pre-recorded speech, Hawking stated that a point of creation would be a place where science broke down. One would have to appeal to religion and the hand of God. So, the question is, has the natural world been around for an infinite amount of time, or is there a point of creation? Hi, I'm Kirk, and I'm a scientist and a philosopher and a person who spends a lot of time thinking about the why questions in life. So if you're interested in discussions pertaining to God, science, and life, then please subscribe to my channel here, where I'll be posting on a regular basis. You can also subscribe to my social media accounts, and the links are below. If I told you that you cannot drink this cup of coffee here until you have removed all the coffee beans in this bag here, one at a time, and there's an infinite number of beans in this bag, when would you be able to drink the coffee? Think carefully, because the answer has huge implications for the origin of the universe. The answer is never, and here's why. If there were an infinite number of beans in this bag, and I were to start removing them one at a time, you would think that the more beans I removed, the fewer there would be left in the bag. But you would be wrong. It is a property of a countably infinite set of things, including coffee beans, of course, that if you remove any integer number of beans from the bag, you still have an infinite number of beans left in the bag. So, if you were to remove beans one at a time, or 10 at a time, or even 1,000,000 at a time, and you kept on doing this for 100 million years, you would never actually make any progress in emptying the bag. You would still have an infinite number of beans left to go before you could drink the coffee. The bottom line is this. If you have to count through an infinite number of coffee beans before drinking your coffee, you will never make any progress whatsoever, and you will never, ever get to drink the coffee. It is only if there were a finite number of beans in the bag that you would be able to make any progress, steadily reducing the number left in the bag until none were left. Only then would you get to drink your coffee. So here's the takeaway. Infinite number of beans in the bag, you never get to drink the coffee. A finite number of beans in the bag, you will get to drink the coffee. So, imagine you walk into a room where there is a person drinking the coffee. What does that tell you about how many beans were in the bag? Well, since you already know that if there was an infinite number of beans in the bag, the person would never ever get to drink the coffee. The fact that this person is drinking the coffee tells you that there was only a finite number of beans in the bag. So what does this example tell us about the history of the universe? Let's pretend that the history of the universe is like a bag of coffee beans, where each bean in the bag represents 1 year in the past. And before I can take a sip of coffee, history must count through all the beans in the bag one at a time. If I can take a sip of coffee right now, then I will have just proved that the number of years history had to count through before I could sip my coffee cannot be countably infinite. So let's try it. There. I have just proved that the amount of time in the past history of this universe leading up to me taking a sip of coffee cannot be infinite. There had to be a beginning, and here is why. Before I could take a sip of coffee this year, last year had to elapse. But before last year could elapse, the year before had to elapse, and so on. So if I can't take a sip of coffee until all the previous years have elapsed, if the number of years in past history were infinite, we would never arrive at this year here, and I would never get to take this particular sip of coffee. So if you see me take a sip of coffee this year here, What does that tell you about how many years had to elapse before we got here? The answer is that history only had to count through, one at a time, a finite number of years before it got to this year here and this sip of coffee. Now perhaps you might be thinking that I pulled some sort of a trick on you, but that's not the case. We can know with mathematical certainty, due to the properties of a countably infinite set of coffee beans, or actual years in the past, that if we had to count through them one at a time, or 10 at a time, or even a trillion at a time, we will never make any progress in working our way through history or the bag of beans, and we will never get to drink the coffee. So the mere fact that I can drink this coffee, or you are watching this video, shows us with mathematical certainty that there could not be an infinite number of beans or years in the bag of history that had to elapse before we could do this. We can conclude, therefore, that there was a point of creation for the universe in the past. Maybe you just watched Avengers Endgame and are wondering, what if there's a multiverse? Would that have to have a beginning too? The answer is, yes, it would require a beginning as well for the same reason. So if we can define nature as the entirety of all physical reality, whether all of physical reality is just this universe or extends to a multiverse, we still cannot escape the fact that there was a point of creation in the past. So that brings us to the ultimate question. Since nature had a beginning, what caused nature to come into existence? We'll look at that in my next video, but if you are too excited to wait until next week, you can check out my blog. It has the answer. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, or at least found it thought-provoking. And if you did, please share it, or you can leave a comment in the section below. And also, don't forget to hit the like button.